A man from Nazareth stands on the sun-baked pavement of the outer courtyard. The air smells of spilled wine, raw panic, and animal dung bleeds into the urgent letters of a tent maker writing to a chaotic church in Corinth, and culminates in an exiled disciple's vision. The localized presence of God is out of the building. And 3 days later, just as he promised, the destroyed Naos breathes again. He walks out of a garden tomb. The ultimate intersection of heaven and earth is rebuilt, completely immune to death. You would think the story ends there. A resurrected king, an empty tomb, a fulfilled promise. The presence of God permanently secured in the immortal body of the Son. But that resurrected body is not the final structure. Because 30 years later, a tent maker writes a letter to a chaotic, compromised Greek city. And he reveals that the blueprint is about to expand in a terrifying new direction. The curtain hangs in shreds. The stone room is empty. The true sanctuary is alive. But the expansion has just begun. Look at the ancient city of Corinth. It is a loud, chaotic port. Sailors walk the whetstone docks. The heavy stench of roasted pagan meat fills the crowded markets. Bronze statues of Greek gods line the busy, sun-baked streets. The young church in this city is an absolute disaster. They are fractured by loud egos. They are fighting over spiritual gifts. They are dragging their own brothers into corrupt Roman courts. They are gorging themselves at the communion table while the poor go hungry, of a city descending from the sky. Every time the concept of the temple appears from this moment forward, the blueprint is fundamentally altered. They are hiring pagan prostitutes on Saturday and lifting their hands in worship on Sunday. They are a mess of flesh and pride. Paul sits down to write them an urgent letter. He must fix this chaos. He must stop the bleeding. You would expect a massive list of moral demands. You would expect heavy threats of divine judgment. You would expect a strict behavioral contract. He does not send rules. He sends an architectural revelation. He asks them one single, staggering question. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you? He does not use the word hieron. He does not compare them to the outer courtyards. He uses that exact, specific, terrifying word Jesus used in Jerusalem. He uses the word Naos. He points directly at their compromised, failing, flesh and blood bodies. The body is not a biological shell. It is a walking holy of holies. Think about the absolute weight of this claim. The glory of God used to require a massive limestone complex. It required heavy woven veils. It required thousands of gallons of animal blood to keep the consuming fire from destroying the priests. Now, that same presence lives inside a tent maker. It lives inside a converted pagan. It lives inside a recovering addict in Corinth. Most people read these passages and assume they are just moralistic poetry. They hear phrases like, "Your body is a temple," and assume it is simply, "The fire that terrified the high priest now burns behind human ribs. The presence that filled the windowless room now beats inside a human chest." Paul is telling them to stop sleeping with prostitutes. But his argument is not about purity rules. It is about cosmic geography. He is telling them they are carrying the fire. He is telling them they are dragging the sacred dimension of heaven directly into pagan brothels. God is not visiting them during a worship service. He is permanently inhabiting their biology. This changes the entire motivation for human holiness. You do not avoid sin to earn God's presence. You avoid sin because you are already carrying God's presence. Your physical body is the new intersection. You are the sacred ground. Heaven has violently invaded the dirt of your own nervous system. But one human body is just one coordinate. A single brick does not construct a massive building. A single stone does not house a kingdom. And while Paul is writing to the chaotic Greeks, an uneducated fisherman is writing a different letter. He is writing to exiles scattered across the harsh provinces of Asia Minor. And Peter reveals that the building project is much bigger than a single ribcage. An older fisherman sits in a crowded, dimly lit room. His hands are thick and calloused, permanently scarred from decades of pulling heavy. Wet nets, a behavioral metaphor, a polite, spiritual way to tell teenagers to stay pure, a theological bumper sticker about personal choices and avoiding sin. Out of the cold waters of the Sea of Galilee, he dictates a letter to a scribe. The parchment is expensive. The words are urgent. He is writing to people who have lost everything. The believers scattered across Pontus, Galatia, and Cappadocia are exiles. They have been stripped of their social standing. They have no political power. They certainly do not own grand buildings with towering marble columns. They gather in secret, in cramped dining rooms, surrounded by the smell of stale bread and burning olive oil. They feel entirely disconnected from the grand, established presence of the divine. And Peter hands them a blueprint. As you come to him, the living stone, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. He shifts the metaphor from the individual to the collective. Paul told the Corinthians that a single human body is a naos, but Peter is describing the brutal, precise masonry required to construct the entire complex. Think about how a stone is prepared in the ancient world. It is violently cut out of the earth. A heavy iron chisel strikes a rough block of limestone. The friction is dusty, loud, and relentless. The rough edges are slowly chipped away by a master builder. The stone is struck repeatedly until it matches the exact dimensions required to interlock with the stones around it. The church is not a collection of isolated shrines. It is a massive, interlocking architecture. But if you look closer at the specific Greek words hiding beneath the English translation, at the way first-century minds understood the terrifying reality. In the ancient temple in Jerusalem, the massive white limestone blocks had to be perfectly aligned to hold up the heavy walls of the sanctuary. If one single block shifted, the structural integrity of the room where God dwelt was severely compromised. Peter is telling these exhausted, marginalized believers that their community actually is the walls. When a group of believers stands together, bearing each other's burdens, absorbing the painful friction of human relationship, and refusing to fracture, they form the physical structure that houses the Spirit of God on earth. The presence does not just rest strictly inside a single ribcage. It fills the terrifying, beautiful space between them. This reality completely shatters the modern obsession with isolated spirituality. You cannot be a temple all by yourself. A single stone is just a rock lying in the dirt. It requires mortar. It requires proximity. It requires the heavy, uncomfortable weight of other living stones resting firmly against it. But Peter's letter addresses an incomplete project. The stones are still being cut. The building is still under construction in the dust of human history. The final architecture has not yet fully materialized. To see what happens, when the building is finally finished, you have to fast forward. You have to leave the Roman provinces and step onto a barren, wind-swept island in the Aegean Sea. We sign the lease. We pour the concrete. We raise the walls. We install the heavy glass doors of sacred space. You start to see something the moral reading completely misses. The temple is not an ethical metaphor. It is an invasion. We line the room with padded chairs and tune the massive black speakers. We build a facility, stand in the air-conditioned lobby, and call it the House of God. We drive there on Sunday morning. We lower our voices when we cross the threshold. We treat the architecture like it is intrinsically sacred. We mourn when a historic church building burns to the ground. We act as if the Almighty just lost his primary residence. We spend centuries erecting Gothic cathedrals, carving heavy marble, and cutting stained glass. We tried desperately to recreate the localized, terrifying majesty of the ancient stone temple, but the building is a phantom. The real estate is an illusion. Look at the progression of the biblical narrative. God starts in a localized garden. He moves to a localized fabric tabernacle. He moves to a localized stone temple in Jerusalem. He moves into the physical body of a carpenter. He moves into the messy, broken bodies of believers in Corinth. He builds those bodies into an interlocking, global structure of living stones. The trajectory is violently outward. The presence refuses to be contained by human masonry. The temple is not a building God decided to visit. It is a body He is building. To feel the weight of what Jesus is claiming, the church is not a destination you drive to. It is a dimension you carry. When a modern believer says, "I am going to church," they are speaking a theological impossibility. You cannot travel to a structure you already are. You cannot enter a sanctuary when your own chest cavity is the Naos. We miss this because a physical building is easy to manage. A brick does not argue. A concrete floor does not betray you. A stained glass window does not require forgiveness. A building is predictable. A building is safe. You can lock the doors on Tuesday and completely ignore it until Sunday. But living stones are heavy. Living stones are sharp. Living stones require the brutal, exhausting friction of grace and truth just to fit together. The ancient Israelites had to travel hundreds of miles through the scorching desert to Jerusalem to find the presence of God. Today, the presence travels to the grocery store. It sits in gridlocked morning traffic. It stands under the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital ward. It breathes in the dusty, choking air of a refugee camp. The Naos has splintered into millions of pieces, walking across the surface of the earth. You have to step completely out of your modern context. You have to forget every modern church building you have ever walked into. This is the reality Paul and Peter were trying to awaken. But even they were writing from the middle of the story. They were describing a building still under construction. To see what happens when the final stone is laid, you have to look at the end of the world. You have to open the final book, written by an exiled disciple on a prison island, who looks up into the sky and sees a city descending. And the most shocking detail of that massive, glowing city is what is completely missing from its center. An old man stands on the sharp, black rocks of a prison colony. The salt spray of the Aegean Sea bites his face. The wind roars in his ears. He is John, the last surviving apostle, the same man who stood in the courtyard 50 years ago and heard a carpenter threaten to tear down the center of the Jewish universe. Now, he is looking at the end of all things. The sky splits open. A massive, glowing city descends from the heavens, settling over the new earth. It is terrifying in its sheer scale. The walls are thick jasper. The foundations are lined with crushed jewels. The massive gates are carved from single, solid pearls. Because in the ancient world, a temple was not a place where people gathered to sing songs and listen to a sermon. John walks through those glowing gates in the vision. He is a first-century Jew. His entire worldview is structured around sacred geography. When you enter a holy city, you look for the center. You look for the massive, towering structure where the deity actually resides. You look for the localized point of intersection. He walks through the golden streets, searching for the inner sanctum. He looks for the Naos, and he stops. He writes down what he sees in Revelation chapter 21, verse 20. And it is the single most shocking architectural statement in the entire Bible. I saw no temple in the city. There is no building. There is no curtain. There is no designated sacred zone to keep humanity separated from the consuming fire. The goal of the universe is not a perfectly reconstructed building. It is a completely unmediated presence. The reason there is no temple in the New Jerusalem is because of the city's dimensions. John measures the city, and he records that its length, its width, and its height are exactly equal. It is a massive, perfect cube. To a modern reader, a cube is just geometry. To an ancient Israelite, a cube is an explosion of meaning. In the ancient tabernacle and in the towering stone temple in Jerusalem, there was only one room that was a perfect cube. It was a cosmic hazard zone. It was the literal intersection of two dimensions. It was the one specific GPS coordinate on the planet, the Holy of Holies, the Naos. The entire city has become the inner sanctum. The veil has not just been torn, the walls have been completely obliterated. God is no longer contained in a windowless room. He is no longer confined to the physical body of a single carpenter. He is no longer walking the earth in the scattered, fragmented bodies of living stones. The presence has flooded the entire human habitat. The Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple, and humanity is living directly inside it. This is the trajectory of the entire biblical story. But this massive, cosmic conclusion is not just a theological fact to file away for the afterlife. It changes what you are carrying right now. A localized presence was locked behind a heavy woven curtain, and a terrified humanity stayed in the outer courts. A carpenter stood on the cold pavement and pointed to his chest, and the intersection of heaven and earth relocated into human flesh. Iron was driven through the true sanctuary on a Roman scaffold, and a massive curtain violently tore from top to bottom. A dead man breathed again inside a dark tomb, and the epicenter of the divine presence became permanently immune to death. Bronze coins are still spinning across the heavy, polished stones. He holds a makeshift whip of cords, where the infinite, burning presence of the Creator allowed himself to touch the dirt. It was beautiful, but it was dangerous. A sacrifice was always required. A tent maker wrote an urgent letter to a chaotic Greek port city, and the fire of the Holy of Holies moved directly into the nervous system of broken converts. An old fisherman sent a blueprint to exhausted, marginalized exiles, and scattered lives were hammered into the interlocking walls of a spiritual house. An exiled apostle looked at the glowing sky at the end of the world, and he saw a massive, perfect cube where the building had completely disappeared. One blueprint, one presence, one house. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The violent masonry from Peter's letter. We want the blinding gold plates of the finished sanctuary. But we resent the heavy iron chisel striking the rough block of limestone. We forget that the Creator does not build his house out of perfect, polished marble. He builds it out of jagged, heavy stones that have to be chipped and shaped by the brutal friction of human relationship just to sit next to each other. The friction is not a distraction from the holy space. The friction is how the walls are formed. If you are in a season where you feel entirely disconnected from the presence of God, where you are waiting for a mystical feeling, a mediator had to stand in the gap. A thick, woven curtain had to stay firmly closed to protect the people from the weight, to hit you, or a beautiful building to fix you. Look at your own chest. You are not waiting for a visitation. You are the Naos. The fire that terrified the ancient high priest is currently resting behind your ribs. And if you feel like you are lying alone in the dirt, remember that a single stone cannot house a kingdom. It requires the heavy, uncomfortable weight of other living stones resting firmly against you to hold the presence in the world. And may the God who refuses to be contained by human architecture violently invade the ordinary dirt of your life and build you into a space where his glory can finally rest. Of that glory. And now, a Galilean rabbi is standing in the shadow of that massive curtain, pointing at his own chest. He is not just predicting his resurrection. He is issuing an eviction notice to a 1,000-year-old system, but the sheer scandal of his claim is impossible to grasp until you walk through the floor plan he is threatening to tear down. In the ancient Near East, a temple is not a meeting hall. It is a physical house for a deity. You walk through massive stone pillars. You breathe in the heavy, suffocating smoke of myrrh and frankincense. You step into the dark interior, and at the absolute center, carved from cedar or cast in solid bronze, sits the idol. The idol is the focal point, the literal physical body that the god supposedly inhabits. But Israel's temple is entirely different. When you walk into the sanctuary complex in Jerusalem, the sensory overload is staggering. The air is thick with the metallic scent of slaughtered lambs. The religious elite, the keepers of the most sacred real estate on the planet, surround him. Their faces are tight with fury, and the loud crackle of fat burning on the bronze altar. The priests walk barefoot on the cold, polished pavement. But if you were to bypass the guards, walk past the golden lampstand, and tear back the heavy woven veil, you would not find a statue. You would find a void. That empty, windowless room the Holy of Holies, is the epicenter of Jewish reality. It is the one specific coordinate, where the dimension of God's uncreated glory directly overlays the dimension of dirt and time. The architecture is not a random floor plan. It is a geography of extreme boundaries. You start in the outer court of the Gentiles, surrounded by the noise of the city, the heat of the sun, and the dust of travelers. You step up into the court of women. You move inward to the court of the Israelites, and then the court of the priests. Every step inward requires more purity, more blood, and more terrifying precision. It is a system meticulously designed to keep a contaminated humanity from stepping too close to a consuming fire. Once a year, exactly, one man steps behind that thick curtain. He carries a golden bowl of blood, and his hands shake. If he carries unconfessed sin, the sheer, unshielded reality of God will kill him on the spot. The temple in Jerusalem is not a monument to human religion. They demand a sign, a proof of authority to justify this absolute chaos in the house of God. And he gives them exactly one sentence. It is the architectural memory of Eden. It is a localized replica of the garden where the Creator and humanity used to walk, together in the cool of the evening. But it is Eden with a lethal security system. God has returned to the neighborhood, but the doors are locked. The presence is strictly contained behind stone walls and woven fabric. For 1,000 years. This is the only way the universe holds together. You bring your sacrifice. You stand in the outer courts, and you watch the smoke rise. You stay in your designated zone, and you accept the separation. That distance feels permanent, until the moment a carpenter walks into the courtyard, looks at the massive stones, and threatens to tear the entire system down to the bedrock. Passover approaches. The sun beats down. The city swells. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims pour through the heavy stone gates of Jerusalem. The streets choke with dust. Men arrive exhausted. Families arrive hungry. They carry Roman denarii. They need Tyrian shekels. They carry nothing. They need unblemished doves for the sacrifice. The outer courtyard of the temple, the only designated space where the nations are allowed to pray, becomes a screaming marketplace. It smells of hot sweat and animal dung. It sounds like a loud, violent toll booth. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I will raise it up. The men staring back at him are bewildered. The frantic bleating of sheep mixes with the sharp, metallic clinking of silver dropping into heavy wooden lockboxes. Jesus walks into this chaos. He does not ask for quiet. He does not gather a crowd for a sermon. He does not start a theological debate with the scribes. He sits down. He braids ropes. He grips the heavy, rough cords. Then he swings. He overturns the heavy wooden tables. He drives out the sheep. He drives out the oxen. He scatters the money changers. Silver coins rain down and roll across the cold, polished pavement. The doves flutter wildly in their wicker cages. The temple guards freeze. The priests panic. The entire economic engine of the religious world violently grinds to a halt. The Jewish leaders surround him. Their faces are flushed with rage. Their absolute authority is challenged in their own house. They demand a sign, a miracle to prove his jurisdiction. What sign do you show us for doing these things? He stands breathing heavily in the cleared-out courtyard. The air is still thick with dust. He looks at them. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The leaders sneer at him. They point to the massive structures around them. 46 years of brutal, back-breaking labor. Massive white limestone blocks, some weighing over 300 tons. Towering walls lined with hammered gold plates. They look at the building. They look up at the massive, white limestone blocks. They look at the gold plates that literally blind the human eye when the midday sun hits them. He is talking about his bones. He is not cleaning the courtyard. He is replacing the center. Every bleeding animal on the bronze altar points to him. Every priest washing his hands in the bronze basin points to him. The heavy, woven curtain hanging in the deep, dark points to his own flesh. He is claiming to be the new intersection. The new living coordinate where the fire of heaven touches the dirt of earth. But to understand exactly how explosive this claim really is, you cannot rely on the English translation. You have to look at the specific syllables slipping out of his mouth on that stone pavement. Because the writer, John, records two completely different Greek words for the English word temple in this single scene. And the second word changes the geography of the universe. John chapter 2, verses 14 through 21. If you read this exchange in English, the text says Jesus went into the temple and then challenged the leaders to destroy the temple. It looks like he is talking about the exact same physical space. But in the original text, John deliberately uses two entirely different Greek words. When John describes the physical complex that Jesus is violently clearing out, in verse 14, the tables, the sheep, the clinking coins, the shouting merchants, the word he uses is the Greek hieron. This is a building project 46 years in the making. It is the absolute center of their geopolitical, economic, and spiritual universe. It appears over 70 times in the New Testament. Hieron refers to the entire sacred precinct. It means the outer courtyards, the massive stone porticos, the sweeping architectural footprint. It is the public real estate. But in verse 19, when Jesus stares back at the furious religious elite and says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up," he switches the vocabulary. He does not say hieron. He uses the Greek word naos. Naos does not mean the outer courtyards. It does not mean the public squares where the money changers sit. The naos is the specific, windowless, terrifying inner sanctum. It is the Holy of Holies, the exact localized coordinate where the fiery presence of the Creator sits guarded behind the heavy woven veil. That single vocabulary shift changes everything. Jesus is not looking at the outer limestone walls. He is looking at the epicenter of divine presence. And he is applying that exact word to his own ribcage. If the precision of these original words is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So Jesus stands in the cleared courtyard, pointing at his own chest. They think he is talking about architecture. They think he is talking about masonry and gold. But this is the beginning of a collision. He is making a staggering claim about the geography of the universe. The ultimate intersection of heaven and earth is no longer fixed to a piece of bedrock in Jerusalem. The Naos is not a localized room. It is a walking, breathing man. The incarnation is not a metaphor. It is a relocation. When the Word became flesh, the uncreated glory of God packed up its bags, left the windowless sanctuary, and moved into the blood and bone of a Galilean carpenter. Jesus himself is the new Holy of Holies. The presence is now portable. But this relocation comes with a devastating physical cost. Because, for a new Naos to truly open to the world, the old boundary line has to be violently torn apart. A hillside outside the city walls. The sky turns black at midday. The air grows cold. You can hear the ragged, labored sound of breathing over the dull roar of the crowd. 3 years ago, he stood on the polished stone pavement of the courtyard and issued a challenge. Destroy this temple. Now, the empire is obliging him. He hangs on the rough wood. The iron is driven through his flesh. A tectonic shift in how heaven interacts with earth. It is a pattern that starts here on this pavement. The true Naos is being dismantled, piece by bloody piece, and the universe is holding its breath. The priests are in the city, slaughtering the Passover lambs. The true lamb is bleeding out on a Roman scaffold. The priests are standing in the quiet of the holy place, completely separated from the empty room by the massive woven curtain. The true presence of God is suffocating in the dark. And then, he drops his head. He exhales. He surrenders his spirit. At that exact second, miles away inside the limestone complex, the geography of heaven and earth violently fractures. The veil tears. This is not a flimsy piece of fabric. Ancient historians describe the curtain guarding the Holy of Holies as being intricately woven from blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, so heavy and thick that horses pulling in opposite directions could not rip it apart. It is the definitive boundary. It is the ancient lock on the door of Eden, designed to keep contaminated humanity away from a consuming fire, and it does not tear from the bottom. Like a seam worn out by human hands, it rips from top to bottom. The cross is not an execution. It is a demolition. The barrier is gone. The locked room is permanently thrown open,